Let's see, and it's 1:30. Are people continuing to come in, or is everybody let in?
People are going to continue to come in, but I will just admit them as they come.
Okay, so I want to welcome everyone today to our latest program, one that we're really excited about that we've been planning for quite a while. If you've come to some of these other programs about Glenview, you know, and I'm Laura Vookles, the chair of the museum's Curatorial Department. And I've been at the museum since 1985. So I've been involved with a number of interpretation and restoration projects about Glenview. In previous talks, we have discussed costumes that would have been worn during Glenview's era. We have discussed the tiles. We have discussed floral designs. We've discussed the woodwork. We're basically getting ourselves through a whole sort of graduate level class on decorative details and lifestyles in Glenview. And one of the things I'm really excited about is today we're going to be talking to Felix Chavez, who worked on the restoration of Glenview's stencils in 1999 and 2005. And this is really one of my absolute most favorite projects that I ever worked on at Glenview or the museum in a pretty long career here. So let me just tell you a little bit about Felix Chavez before we get started, and then we will proceed to the program. Do you want to maybe go to the next slide? Just if you've been to any of these programs, you're familiar with the idea that we have been muting you just so that there won't be a lot of feedback during the talk. And today we have Olivia, who spoke in the beginning. Olivia Cipriano is our manager of programs and operations. She's running the slideshow. Yvonne Woodard is assisting with that and will be moderating the questions, despite the fact that below I accidentally said it would be Saralinda. Saralinda is not here with us today. The next slide, please, Olivia. Okay, and I always just show views of Glenview from the 19th century and the turn of the 21st century to orient you in case you're joining us and you've never visited the museum, which I hope if you haven't, you can someday. But I want to tell you a little bit about Felix Chavez. We hired after a competitive search in 1999 when we were working on a major restoration of Glenview, including the recreation of our parlor and the opening up of a historic skylight above our stairway. We hired Felix Olympio Chavez and his company to recreate, research, accurately restore our stencils. So I want to tell you a little bit about Felix. And is Felix's video on so we can show him and introduce him? Olivia, is there a way to do that to make him show up? Say hi, Felix. Maybe that will make you show up.
Hi, everybody.
Yeah, I just spotlighted him, so I'll
Okay, there you go. Felix Olympio Chavez grew up in Talavera, Peru, in the rugged highlands of the Andean countryside near Cusco. That, according to James Holloway, an author, he said it endowed him with an exceptional visual sense, a keen appreciation of color and perspective, and an almost mystical aptitude to combine these elements into a vision at once traditional and strikingly individual. Felix attended the National School for Fine Arts in Lima, Peru, and graduated in 1969 with first prize and a gold medal. Formally and on his own, he studied easel painting, restoration, and ceramics. Felix came to Manhattan in 1971, participated in art exhibitions, and taught art at Lehman College. He worked with Carmen Associates as a decorative painter and later as supervisor at Rambush Decorating, which at the time had recently completed the first stencil restorations in Glenview. In the mid-1980s, Felix formed Fine Art Decorating with his partner David Brown, and in 1991 created the firm that still bears his name, Felix Chavez, Inc. He concentrates on high-end restorations, and we'll be hearing about at least two of them besides Glenview. Well known as a leader and pioneer in his field, he is the recipient of a number of awards, among them the New York Preservation League's Achievement Award for his work on St. Michael's Episcopal Church in New York, and the Historical Interiors Award of Excellence for his work on the Masonic Lodge, and we'll be seeing some photographs of that. In addition to Radio City Music Hall and many religious buildings, Felix's museum and library clients have included the Barnum Museum in Bridgeport, the American Museum of Natural History, Ellis Island Museum, Morris Jumel Mansion, New York Botanical Garden, New York Public Library, and the Tenement Museum. And so why don't we go to the next slide, Olivia? So the topics for today, and I will be discussing back and forth at a lot of it with Felix, are the original stencil artists, Leissner and Louis, who originally did the stencils in Glenview in 1876 and 77. That was Alexander Louis and Edward Leissner. Louis was the artist and Leissner was the business partner. And we'll talk briefly about the first restoration of the stencils done by Rambusch in the 1970s. Then we're going to have some highlights of New York City restorations that Felix has completed, and he can tell you a little bit about those projects. They were much more elaborate than Glenview. And also then we will get back to the Parlor and show some behind the scenes pictures of how that evolved in 1999. Can we have the next slide, please? And then the next slide. So I just want to show you these two historic photographs of Glenview that may start to look a little familiar by now. In the mid-1880s, Edward Bierstadt, who was the brother of Hudson River School painter Albert Bierstadt, did some photographs of the interior of Glenview. These are the only two really good 19th century photographs we have, and they've been very helpful during the restorations as far as figuring out what the stencils originally looked like, because they were a combination of removed and painted over throughout the years in the early days of the museum, and also things like recreating the wallpaper, figuring out the furnishings. So I just wanted to remind you of some of these historical sources. Next slide, please. So just to briefly tell you a little bit about Leissner and Louis, we have a article that was written in the Yonkers paper in 1877, just before the Trevors moved into the house. And it specifically mentions that the decorative painting was executed by Leissner and Louis of New York. And this is an ad for their firm from a couple of years after that, or actually the very next year. And it mentions that not only do they provide artistic house decorations in fresco, which probably weren't actual fresco. Do you know at the time in the 19th century, Felix, would they ever actually work in real fresco on wet plaster, or would they have been making them the way you do on dry plaster?
Most of the places I found it, especially in that gigantic project was done in New York Public Library, is fresco directly on plaster or over the wall, not even the added canvas. That's we call fresco seco. That's right. Most of the technique in United States was practicing fresco seco. Right. Fresco, that's a very special technique, is European, especially Italian. That's long process. Maybe that's the reason we didn't develop fresco.
Right, fresco meaning like on wet plaster. It was a whole other process that's very difficult.
And you have to do letter by letter, piece by piece.
Right.
Fantastic technique, but lasts forever too. You know, like New York Public Library was done directly over the ceiling walls. The murals, Renaissance style mural, after several years was start peeling off because separating from the fresco, I mean from the plaster wall, the painting was applied over.
Right. Well, so this ad on the left for Leissner and Louis that mentions that they did painting decorations, it also mentions paper hangings, which is what they would call wallpaper at the time. So they introduced their own wallpapers, and they also could provide you with furniture, upholstery, hangings, again, that means wallpaper, woodwork, chandeliers, stained glass. So because of that, We don't have a lot of information about who were the overall interior decorators in Glenview, but one of our theories is it could have been that Leissner and Louis not only made the stencils, but also were responsible for some of the other, the overall sense of the decoration, which is very integrated. Next slide, please. So just to give you a little bit, tiny bit of information about Leissner and Louis, another house that they worked in was Henry Ward Beecher's house in Peekskill. And this is a sketch of it that was published at the time. And you get a sense also like at Glenview, you have the wall divided into 3 parts. You have a wallpaper dado at the bottom, and then a main part of the wall, and then a frieze, and then a ceiling that's divided into sections. This was very popular and a similar, effect that was going on at Glenview. And then I mentioned that Leissner and Louis did wallpaper. At the right, you have 2 examples of their wallpaper. One is in the collection of the Cooper Hewitt Museum, and the other is actually a sample of wallpaper that was sent to me in the 1990s by the Bush House in Salem, Oregon. I was researching Leissner and Louis, and they have original papers of that were in that house, and they had extra at the time, and they just sent me a piece of it for our study collection. Next slide. And then just one final slide to give you another idea of how some of these houses are decorated. This is an unidentified house in Rochester, probably in Rochester, New York. And all of the decoration here is achieved with wallpapers. So that's one thing to think about when you're looking at the images of Glenview. It was a little bit less expensive for somebody to just buy different kinds of wallpaper and apply them to the ceiling in various patterns, rather than have artists come in and get up on scaffolds and hand paint and hand stencil everything the way they did it at Glenview. So in this case, it was done all with wallpaper. Next slide. So next slide. So basically, when the museum first opened in the 1920s, the museum was just, the whole museum was in Glenview, and Glenview wasn't considered very historic or interesting. This was the 1920s, the age of Le Corbusier and international architecture, and everything was white, and nobody was really interested in Victorian design. So it was only when the Victorian period that, when Glenview became around 100 years old, and the preservation movement had kicked in, and it could be listed on the National Register of Historic Places, and the museum built another building to have its other exhibits, that they really started concentrating on restoring Glenview. And so in 1973 and 74, they had Rambusch Company come in and work on part of the recreation of the stencils. And they concentrated on the Great Hall here and the West Rooms, because they did some peeling down, like how would they remove the paint safely to expose the design here, Felix?
That's a very interesting question. In order to save in the background of the last coat of paint has to be removed with chemically. With paint remover could be maybe easy to remove with a liquid paint remover or semi-liquid, with nicely and gently pass with bristle brush over, and then leave it a couple minutes to activate it chemically, and start to scraping very carefully with very soft dry brush, and start to taking off the last coat of regular painting like it was having in the museum.
Yeah, and just to remind everyone, Felix wasn't working with Rambusch until a few years after this, but he did work with Rambusch, so he knows how they would have been doing this. They actually kept a diary of all the work they did to try to uncover the original decorations, which had been painted over. And what we did, because the only real way to restore this kind of stenciling is basically to repaint it. Once you uncover it, you're just going to find something that looks like what we have on the far right here. It's going to be faded. It's not really going to be complete. But what the museum decided to do at the time, and you can look around if you're in the mansion and find it, in almost every part of the design, they left one little area that is not restored, so that preserves evidence of how they decided basically to repaint them. So this is a photograph today that shows you an area in the Great Hall where you can see how they uncovered the paint. Next slide, please. So when they first started working on this and they would, uncover these sort of ghosts of the designs, they were also doing a lot of sketches of the designs that they found to try to start to recreate the stencils, because you don't just repaint it in by hand, you actually make a stencil and apply it the way it was applied the first time. And so this is a sketch of the hall cornice, and some of these designs were left at the museum as part of our archives. And then this shows the part of the ceiling that, well, it's really the sort of up by the frieze where that design is today. And you start this way too, right, Felix? You make a drawing and then you turn it into a stencil?
Yes, the process is you have to, after you have the pattern or the design, you need to make replicate it the same thing in the new surface. You have to trace all the design with tracing paper, like a total drawing. And then that you pass in cardboard. In the cardboard, you have to trace again color by color, that we call color separation. And each color has to be go in different cardboard or mylar, whatever is the material you are using. And then that you have to color up. Example, red has to be colored up only red, green, etc. So at the end, you put it one by one, staple over the surface and start to creating the total design, all the colors you want. At the end, probably you have to do it. That's mandatory.
Yeah.
Dark color, especially the outline, that's very thin. I saw somewhere last time you showed me, you still have some evidence. Very narrow part of the outline is dark. So long. So
because they're trying to get the design right. Yeah.
You cannot do it that by hand. It has to be very sharp, very straight and clean. So that's why we did it. It's whole process.
Yeah, well, later we have some pictures that show how they have to do it one color at a time. Could we see the next slide? And I think they have some notes. Oh, well, this is just to remind you again that they were going by what they uncovered, but then they also had the picture of the ceiling that you could see through this doorway in case they were sort of wondering, if they couldn't quite tell. Because sometimes when it's the ghost, it's really hard to see where the lines really were. Could we have the next slide, please? And again, oh, that is, yeah. So in this is saying, tracings from uncovered old ornaments. These are some sketches that they were making in the beginning in 1973 and 74. And this is, I think this is one of the stencils that you used, because after more than 40 years, besides working on the parlor and the underneath the skylight, Felix's artists needed to restore some of the peeling stencils that had been restored in the 1970s. After 40 years, some of them needed to be touched up, and you had to do that basically by making a new stencil. Next slide, please. So again, this is just a detail of what the ceiling of the library looks like today. Here's a sketch of what the border that's immediately above it, the one with the red background and the yellow flowers, that's a sketch of that area. And then this is one of Rambush's artists. Looks like he's hand painting in some of the details of the stencil. And you can see here to the left of him how some of the stenciling has been done, but not all the black has been put in there. And also on the border below that, which is that sort of red and yellow flower border, only the background and some of the black has been put up. Am I correct in what I'm saying about that, Felix?
Yes, the black, normally any dark color goes at the end. When he separated all the colors, each color in different stencil paper, and color up and then apply, when you finish apply all the stencil work, all the colors, at the end, you close with black.
Yeah, some of it has to be done by hand, and we'll have some better pictures of that later. Next slide, please. Okay, and this is just another little detail of one of the stencils, and this may be one of your stencils. You said this cardboard, this yellow cardboard, which is darkened from age, was one of the ones you liked to use, and it's for that flowered area around the edge of the ceiling. And you can see on it that it's really a working document. It has the remnants of the green paint and the rust colored paint, and then just, you know, the tape that was used to tape it in place while it was being used. Next slide.
Yes.
Now this is what you were talking about, using the stipple technique to transfer a drawing. This is in the dining room, and these birds would have been completely hand painted. Something like this is too complicated for a stencil, right, Felix?
Yes, only thing, if you wanted to repeat same bird in many other areas, you have to make a stencil, only the outline. The inside, the details, you have to do it by hand. Yes.
And we'll see later in the parlor, there were also some birds that were painted by hand. Next slide, please. This is just another detail from in the dining room, which also was, some of this area was restored. It was first done in the 1970s and then restored in 1999 by Felix and his artists. And this shows the initial drawing and then turning the drawing into a stencil and then the final effect. And does this look like it's actual gold leaf, Felix?
That I cannot able to see if it's gold leaf, but that like a brown background after the dark, I see, so that is the old-fashioned cardboard, we call stencil cardboard, was using. That's that golden looking surround that black area.
Yeah.
Oh, like a framing the design.
Yeah, and one thing that is really easy to see in this drawing when you're looking at it compared to in the stencil, when you're looking at it compared to the drawing and the final piece, is how they have to dot the lines. In other words, when a line is solid, if it was solid all the time throughout the stencil might just start to fall apart. It has to have little areas where you don't cut all the way through so that it holds together. So then you can see, for example, in the lines that radiate out from the center square in the stencil, there's a little piece that's not cut, and then the artist will go in by hand and finish that off.
Very good observation. Those like a bridge is purposely, you have to do that. That is going to hold it, some design. Otherwise, what's going to hold us?
Yeah, it's just going to fall apart.
When you finish, you retouch by hand that little bridges. That's minimum.
We have pictures of the artist doing that in the parlor. Next slide, please.
Very good.
And then this is just another area of the dining room that shows the drawings and the finished areas. And then in the next slide, this is a secret area you all get to see that normally we don't have open to the public just because it's a very small area and it's a very heavy doors on some old 19th century hinges. But when you come in the front door of the mansion, you actually had a small vestibule, so a little small entry area. And then, you know, maybe you would or maybe you would not be let into the Great Hall to visit the Trevors. And so this is the vestibule, and this area was extensively re-restored by Felix in 1999. And you can see this little stencil is one of those kind of snowflake stars up on the ceiling. I always thought this would make a great Christmas paper, this ceiling. All right. And now I wanted you to be able to show us a little bit about some of the other restoration projects you've done, because some of them are much more monumental than what you did at Glenview. Let's see the next slide. So this is the Masonic Hall. Do you want to tell us a little bit about this? Because this project was really interesting, because even when it was initially finished in 1912, they didn't have enough money to finish all the decorations, right?
Yes, that's true. When we found it, was everything painted monochromatic, normally beige colors or too creamy colors, because looks they run out of money. That's my guess, because all the interior, you can see those beautiful details, architectural features, full of art, but no finish. To do in those details, style by style, Doric, Corinthian, etc., all those copies from Europe, from the classical time. My job was, number one, I have to say thank you. They granted us the project. So all the interior was monochromatic. Whatever you are seeing, all the skills, all the colors, everything is my design. I am very happy.
And where is this? Tell people where it is. I mean, it's not open to the public, right? You can't probably go in unless you have an invitation, right?
No, in the past, before we finished this one, was totally closed. Nobody can be getting looks like that, only the Masons, the brother Masons, and minus the women, they don't supposed to go. Now, after we finish all those restorations in 12 rooms, over 40 ante-rooms, staircases, etc., except the main lobby, we didn't do it. They open to the public, men's and women's, and they created one wonderful program, the tour. They have one office for tour for free. It's just you have to call by phone, and then you can get in now. No, now, because I don't know, with pandemia, maybe it's still closed, but now it's anybody can be getting. You can visit and enjoy every room.
And where is it? Where?
That's in number 71 building, West 23rd Street. 71 okay. West 23rd Street, between 6th Avenue and 5th Avenue. It's corner of 6th Avenue and 23rd and 24, one block.
Okay. Could we have another slide, Olivia? So this gives you a sense of what Felix was talking about, that it was never finished and given any colors, really. This is the Corinthian room, and this shows one of your artists working on this sort of unusual column. And then in the next picture on the far right, you see the finished column. Do you want to say something about this room, Felix?
Yeah, about the column you touch, about the column is very special column for the Masons. Only this design in colors, etc., they request to respect the same thing in every room. I think so this is very symbolic for ceremonial moments of the graduations, when they come from other room, the apprentice.
Oh, yeah, I thought I was confused because I did see it in more than one room and I didn't know why.
I'm glad you mentioned. You see, that detail is very important for the Mason. Only that one we repeat same thing every room. After we created those colors, the colors they gave us, the pattern. All the rest is 100% redesigning or recreating new design.
Can you say a little bit about the artists that have worked with you over the years, their backgrounds and how you trained them?
Yeah, in Glenview, I saw other day two artists I recognize, Elba and Carlos, they are professional fine artists like that. This one is one of the artisans, is trainee especially for gilding. We train it in groups, one gilders, because has to be done these rooms very fast, and they give me only 3 months to finish each temple, each one. However,
how many people did you have to have working at one time?
in each room, I use it 15. One group has to be refinish the wood, the marbles, stones, and all the rest is decorative finish. And
why don't we see the next slide, because this room was very special to you. The Hollander room. You want to tell everybody why this room is very special to you?
It's very special because I have the great pleasure and grant. I have to thanks all the time the liberty of freedom they give me, the trustees, to create it in every room, whatever design I decide. So, but most of the rooms is European copy from the classical times. And okay, that's fantastic. That's why I was trying to concentrate in each room. But I thought we needed something to represent us of our Americas. So I say, since they give me the freedom, why I don't do the sample different and inspire in our all civilizations of the continent, which in the south, Incas Empire and all arts they created in every corner, the architectural, textile, ceramics, paintings, etc. In the north, we have it, Mayans and Toltecs, Aztecs, and etc. So, but I combine it here, few details is representing that. So from there comes the idea to do it this room.
In the next slide, there is a detail. I zoomed in.
Yes.
So you can see that.
Each square is different designs, warriors, different kinds symbols of those civilizations. And it's very beautiful. And
there's another detail, Olivia.
Did it with a stencil technique. There.
Okay, well, and I think I have some other slides of the, this is the Renaissance room. It's pretty elaborate, and all those details are from this room, right, Felix?
Yes, one of the favors most of the people is Renaissance room. And in this room, I apply my own design I created after so many years practicing. I discovered some kind of finishing, some skill, like you can say that one. The critics, they call opalescent finish. I don't even think in that. I want to just try to finish it to beautiful as possible. Like we found it in St. Michael's Episcopal, Mr. Tiffany, he did it beautiful finishings over the plaster moldings. So this is, everything is plaster molding. Whatever you are seeing like a porcelain looking or metallic looking, that's just a plaster. That's my own creation, new technique.
Okay, and we have a picture, I think, Olivia, of them working on this or another room. So this is them applying gold leaf, right, Felix?
Applying gold leaf and the granular ceiling. Granular ceiling, we did it just in 4 months and a half. It's gigantic, like a theater. They have it in their second floor. It's, they're applying my personal gilding. It's beautiful ornamental moldings in there too. It's fantastic. So for me, it was a crime to paint it one or two color. I says, no, every detail I have to show to the public how beautiful was installed those ornamental moldings. Probably this one, they did it very professional artists, sculpture artists, whether they brought up from Europe or they did it here, but it's fantastic work in every corner, every molding is beautifully done. So my job, my intention was each detail was treated properly, beautifully, and pay attention to the public. It's like saying, I am here, look me. So that was my intention. So
All right.
I think everybody likes any.
I think next we have some pictures of St. John Baptiste. Yeah. And this church is also in the city, right?
Yes, it's in the city in 70, 79, 78. It's Lexington corner of 79 and Lexington Avenue, right in the corner. It's a unique church, has Renaissance style, Italian Renaissance, outside two towers in both sides of the main entrance. It's unique. Whole interior, again here, well, you can cry, well, if you are artist. I found that gray color, one monochromatic gray color. So I says, oh my God, how there they cover with gray colors, beautiful ornamental moldings, St. Jean Baptiste. Everything's art. I'm talking in terms of the.
Yeah, I think we have some more details, Olivia.
Yeah. So all interior of St. Jean the Baptiste, I redesigned it from the ceiling to the barrel. Yeah, that is the main sanctuary ceiling, cove ceiling. The murals, everything we did it. And all the details is a large silver leaf, gold leaf, copper leaf, and the columns, marbleizing, imitation to marble, verde aber, sienna marble, etc. It's a lot of beautiful things in this.
I love the illusion of looking through the ceiling to the clouds.
Yes, one of the clouds personally I did it when my little kid is sitting right next to me. She was just a baby, 7, 8 years old, and Rumi, the brother, a little bit, couple of years older. I took them all the way up.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, poor little kids was start to cry, but I took for help me to clean the brush, because personally I want to live with my hand done. One of the cloudy murals is not here, it's in the book.
So you were up there lying on the scaffold like Michelangelo?
Yes, and my 2 kids was helping me.
Oh my gosh, my mom would have a heart attack.
The mom was almost having heart attack, obviously. That dome is, I think, 170 all the way up, feet from the floor all the way up. It's fabulous, this church. One day when past the pandemic, now it's open every day, half day. You can visit. It's beautiful church.
Okay. Well, what?
The lettering of the hymn is real 23 carats gold. It's,
wow.
Yeah, that's a large real gold we spend it besides of imitation gold leaf, silver leaf, copper, bronze, etc.
And is that Tiffany glass or somebody else? Do you know?
No, it's not Tiffany. Maybe they have a couple of Tiffany's, but they brought from France, from Chartres.
Oh, wow. Okay. Olivia, could we see what we have next? Okay, now we're getting back to work in the parlor, and look at you there in 1999.
I was still young.
So basically, in 1999, the museum embarked on a huge restoration project in Glenview. Previous to that, the areas which are now our parlor and our billiard room had been exhibition galleries, and the area over our stairs where you can now see our lay light had been covered over probably in the 1950s or 60s, because before the National Preservation Act, well, and still now, a rise like that in a building is considered a fire hazard, because you have a tunnel that fire can rise up through. But now that things can be designated historic structures, they realize you should have some dispensation to be able to keep that corridor open, so you look up to this beautiful skylight. So we restored that. And so to do that, I mean, the room was completely empty, as you'll see maybe in the next picture. Do we have a better? Well, this is just reminding you of the historic picture, and this is what the room looked like after we finished our project, including the ceiling that was done by Felix and his artists. We also had to recreate the fireplace and the wallpaper and a carpet and the fabric. I mean, you know, that could be a whole other program. Why don't we see the next slide? And this is just a detail, and just keep this in mind that in this room, unlike some of the other rooms, there wasn't a lot of detail left on the ceiling. It was one of the first rooms that the museum, quote unquote, renovated after they opened in 1924. And it was the contemporary art gallery. And, you know, it's hard to blame them that they didn't have the foresight. It was, the mansion was only 45 years old and the Victorian era was completely out of style, but they did remove these stencils. So the photographs became critical to being able to recreate the ceiling. Next slide, please. So this is what we were starting with. As you can see, the room was completely empty. And this shows some of the stencils going up. There's an artist up on the scaffold, but then the whole room was set up as a study area and an office. I mean, is there anything you want to say about that, Felix?
Yeah, normally we needed this kind of space. We requested probably from the museum to like a studio. That's why we set up working tables, drawing tables. For we needed a proper space for making drawings and color separations, mixing colors and testing, all that.
Yeah, the next picture shows some more detail of that office area.
There I start to working, obviously.
Yeah, so this artist is making a drawing, but then see all the designs that they have taped up on the walls, including the photograph. I don't know if you see on the right-hand photograph in the upper left, you see the photograph of the room that I showed before is pasted up there. And then the little corner you just see in the next photograph on the left, upper right-hand corner of that, you see a detail of the molding is up there. And then there's like a color palette for the room above the where the fireplace is going to be. Anything else you want to say about this? Would this have been you had like a manager who was there every day, who was your second in command, right?
Yes, has to be every day because I cannot be every day too, because I have to attend other projects at the same time. Yes, those photographs, whatever color you gave us, and that has to be reproduced, enlarged over the in different scale and based of the dimension we want to do it directly over the wall. So, however, the size or dimension of those photos we needed to transform into the stencil and enlarge it has to be done over the table by artists, has to be make a copy.
Yeah, and I would come in the morning, every morning I would check in with them and they would show me what they were doing. And, you know, it amazed me how much creativity was involved in interpreting something. I think even in the year 1999, I thought that somehow you would blow up this photograph and just trace it and you'd be done. That shows how naive I am. I mean, just as far as like how much the petals, are they squared off? Are they rounded? Is this line going above this line? There were so many discussions we had about those tiny little details. And even before we got into all the colors, which we had to do a lot of research on because we didn't know exactly what the colors had been. But this part of the fireplace that you see here that's already been installed is original to the room. So we had that to base on for the colors. We knew there was a peacock in the room. We had that to be based on. We knew the room had been described as cream and gold. So some of our research of colors came from that. Next slide. And then Felix did find one area of the room where there was some colors, which looks very darkened right now, but it did reinforce the idea that sort of peacocky blues and greens were some of the colors in the room. And then on the right, you see that we taped up on the wall some of the wallpaper once we got samples of it to help guide working on the colors. I mean, I remember you all would paint up a few different samples that were slightly different, and then we would come down and have a meeting, me and the architect who was Page Ayers Cowley and our director at the time, Philip Berry, and we would debate, and Beth Hendricks, who was the assistant director in charge of the whole project, and we would decide which one we wanted to go with.
Yeah, that's why we had to do it samples, submit it to the board. I assume you has been there, and everybody has to put in their opinion. At the end, after all those opinions comes together, so we have to keep enlarging whatever is the decision.
Well, I'm going to keep going because I want to leave a little time for questions. So this is one of the artists also who is, I guess, creating a sample drawing. And then once the drawings were created, this is shows that you taped them up on the ceiling to get a sense if the scale was right.
Right.
Next slide. And then in this picture, and you see that, you know, they're working up on a scaffold. One of the artists is applying a stencil. You see the blue tape and he's got the stencil taped up there. But then the other artist is going through and hand painting the lines to be solid. So you can see in this photograph that some of the lines still aren't fully connected, and that's what he's working on, right, Felix?
Yes, all those letter bridges was left because that's the nature of the stencil, to hold it, the design has to be filled with by freehand, but it's a small area, but still that has to be done. No any other regular painter, has to be artistic artist, basically.
Yeah. And I was trying to remember how long you all were on site, but it was a few months at least, I think.
And I think so we was using maybe this guy with red shirts is applying color with a little staple. We didn't use conventional staple brush, which you can find it in art stores. We created for ourselves much more softer, more precise, and more sharp. Leave the border or the edge with foam sponge. We create one little round,
yeah, it looks like a sponge.
The sponge is very fine from foam. That, but before you have to try over the piece of paper or cardboard, whatever, on the table, and has to be precise the amount of color. Otherwise, can be messed up. Has to be not too much, not too little. And when you are ready, train a little bit over the table, and then you apply directly over the wall, over the design. So that's the example. I have to emphasize that kind of staple, no brush, staple sponge, I can call,
right.
Is our creation.
Wow. Next slide, please.
And we did it in this museum.
This is just more pictures of them working. And you can see how in the corner around the fireplace, where the fireplace is going to be, they're going to have to figure out a way to have that meet up in a aesthetically pleasing manner. The photographs showed some of those joined areas, but probably not others. Could we have the next slide? And this is where I was talking earlier about the bird being painted freehand. You see the design taped up on the ceiling for the artist to copy, and then you see the final ceiling.
Yeah,
so, yeah. There was a lot of discussion about the bird, I think, as I recall. Next slide, please. Okay, so in the Great Hall, which above the stairs, that whole area you see on the right where there's a painted design, that was a dropped acoustical style ceiling with fluorescent lights when I first started working at the museum. And when you went up to the attic, you could see that the skylight, the lay light they call it, was basically intact. It didn't even need a lot of restoration, just cleaning, and one of the roundels was too broken and had to be recreated. So we had that restored, and then we had to figure out what we were going to paint in this area. And then on the next slide, I'll show you what my reasoning was. This is a photograph from the earliest days of the museum on the second floor of Glenview. And you can see that they haven't painted over the stenciling yet. And then I apologize that you can't really see in this photograph, but if I'm looking at the original negative, and this is a contact print of the negative from the period, to the left of the flag, you can see that the border is the same. So I deduced from that that the design that had been below the railing of the skylight would have been the same as this ceiling. And that's how we proceeded. And on the right, you see the artists working on it. And you see that the degree that we had to go to scaffold this area and protect the staircase. And I don't know, did y'all do that, or did the contractors do that? Did you protect the stairs and put up the scaffold?
Normally, our job involves from the protection to the erection in a small amount of scaffold like this.
Okay, well, then the next slide shows it even more.
Yeah,
there you can see the stairs protected at the bottom and the scaffolding going up. It was very complicated because the staircase goes up and then it divides. And so they had to put the scaffolding up on either side of the lower staircase. Go on. And so here we show people working again, and I apologize for the blurriness. These are just Kodak snapshots, but this is your stencil, I believe, for the design that he's working on there, the one with the red background.
Yeah, that's color separation. Is one of the colors probably has to be applied in those stencil was colored up already.
And
whatever you're doing in there has to be one color, and then in the next color by color, you have to apply.
And I'm going to rush through just so we can let people ask some questions. So also in 2005, you came back to help us fix some peeling areas in our sitting room, which had been, as I said, first painted in the 1970s. And I just have a couple of slides of that, but I'd like to get to the questions. So this is the main frieze. Oh, can we go back for 1 second? The chrysanthemum frieze in the sitting room. And I just wanted to show for 1 second this Leissner and Louis wallpaper again, because it's chrysanthemums also. And it's just, shows that that was a motif that they favored. And then the next slide shows some of your artists up there working on a stencil. They've got the stencil up on the ceiling. And the next slide.
That's two artists, men and women.
Right. Yes. We talked about that you said maybe about 10% women artists working for you, something like that.
Yes.
And then this shows the stencils sort of hanging on the scaffolding after they're being used. And this shows some of the stencils because you let us keep them as a record of the job. And we have them in our archive. And then the next slide. And then I think we'll see if we have any questions. Yvonne, have any questions been coming in on Facebook or in the chat?
I'm looking in the chat now, and it doesn't seem like we have any questions just yet. Let's see. I'm going to head over to Facebook here. Sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties.
No, that's fine. Feel free, anybody that has any questions, to type in the chat. And one of us will try to answer it.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear any questions.
Well, we're trying to see if anybody typed any questions. Let me see if I can look in the chat myself. No. Oh, somebody says, please describe the stippling technique again. I guess this is Joan Culver. I think what she means is, what's the difference between that and if you would just like brush in on the stencil with a regular paintbrush, maybe? Patting with the sponge, maybe?
Stippling is with both, either with broach tape or that technique we created, make it much more soft, more even with a sponge. Either one has to be a stipple. We discovered it's much more gently, more fine, more finishing, especially for very sharp borders or edge. The best for me is sponge.
And by a stipple, I think what you mean is you're kind of tapping it or patting it, not rubbing it or brushing it.
No.
Yeah.
You don't brush. That's painting. Stencil has to be stippling. Either one, with brush or sponge, has to be same proceed.
Oh, I don't actually remember the answer to this question. Someone said, did you do room by room or one room at a time? I think you must have done some of it simultaneously, because in 1999, you had the parlor and the stairwell were new work, but then there was some restoration going on in the in all the rooms, a little bit of peeling paint, and then it was pretty extensive in one area of the dining room and in the vestibule. Do you remember if they were working on it simultaneously?
Since so we was working room by room, that's the best way to do it.
Yeah.
Also, to control, because same scaffold you have to move, protection, everything is much more efficient and has to be more responsible in places like that.
Well, I definitely think I remember coming in and talking to them about I remember my part of it being separate, at least definitely the parlor you did first, and then we worked on the stairs.
Yeah, the stairs were separate because you had to erect the scaffold different manner, not just in the flat floor and the
Well,
room.
I was really worried about figuring out, I'm trying to remember. I think at first we hadn't really even thought about the fact, or maybe Paige had to point out that there would have been decoration on the stairs because we had no picture from the period. And that's why I was really excited when I realized that we could see it in that early museum era picture. That's something that I really realized when I was working on this project, how much information you might get from older pictures even after the museum moved in, even if you didn't have old pictures from when the family lived there. Somebody said that they want to say, to provide testimony to the meticulous artistic efforts that you provide to the minutest detail of every project, that you are a master artist who heals the ravages of the past and preserves the beauty of the present and the future. That is from someone named Jordan Bienenstock. So that's a nice compliment. And somebody else says, absolutely beautiful, thank you. Oh, someone wants to know what type of paint, and is it primer and a top coat? And I apologize, Yvonne, I didn't mean to jump in and start asking all these questions. I'll turn off my chat and let you look.
Yeah, I can answer
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
The painting we was using, it was the best pigment, Japan pigment, oil base. By the way, in entire project, we didn't use any acrylic base, was everything oil.
And that surprised me because traditional fresco, wet fresco, is tempera paint, right? Or some sort of tempera paint.
But that's fresco. This is not fresco, it's painting, decorating with stencil technique. So we was using for mixing the color, matching the color, the pigments, Japan pigment. That is one of the best pigments, and most of the finest one we have in the market.
And then do you keep a record of like the percentage of each color that goes in? Like say, I mean, this is going to sound like a silly question, but you get halfway through the room and you didn't mix up enough of that particular blue. You have a record of exactly the mixture?
Yes, normally we keep the percentage of the how much pigment, how much white color, white paint, etc. But we never apply any color until the end. We have to leave a little bit in the small can and tape it and put it the name. And with that one, we can mix almost exactly if we have any little portion remaining. That's where we have to have artists in there, because the artists, they go fine art school, they're supposed to know how to mix the colors. So that's very important to have in every project professional artists as an assistant.
Well, it's 2:30. So Yvonne, do we have any other questions?
Yeah,
okay.
From Facebook, someone asked, how long did this restoration take?
I'm not sure either of us remember. Do you, Felix? A few months, I think.
Yeah, it was a few months, but besides of the main, we was doing later other rooms too. That was restoration.
Yeah, I mean, the entire project, we started with a historic preservation report that was finished in 1995. And then I think in 96, we started, the process to choose an architect. We started working on the skylight, the ley light restoration in 98. And then pretty much all 99 in the early part of the year is when we were working with you. We opened in October 99, reopened. We had the whole mansion closed, during that whole process. Anything else, Yvonne?
I think that's it for the Facebook questions. Let me go jump back to Zoom.
Oh, someone wanted to know what Japan paint is. What's Japan paint, Felix?
Japan paint is oil-based pigment. It's not really, it comes in a small amounts, normally 1/4 the largest one. And it's some kind of expensive, but it's very fine pigments. We have now also the universal pigments, but not in quality, the best is Japan pigment.
Wow. Felix, I want to thank you so much for coming to talk to us. We've been planning this for so long and really wanting to do it. And, I want to thank everybody that helped. Yvonne, thank you. Olivia, thank you. Olivia, do you want to jump in and say anything about our upcoming programs or just a general goodbye?
Well, yes. So coming into October, our planetarium programs are going to be moving from our virtual planetarium show for kids is going to be moving to Saturdays at 11:30. So if you are someone that has your kids and brings them to watch, just know that the time has changed from 5 p.m. on Tuesday to 11:30 a.m. on Saturday, just as a little change of pace. Also, our teen art projects and story times are most likely going to be changing as well, so please keep an eye out for that. We're going to be having some on-site programs as well, as including a salsa night, I think this upcoming week, which you guys should all come out and try and go to. And we'll be doing outdoor planetarium demonstrations in October as well on our Saturdays. So please stay tuned for that. And we're very excited to see you guys.
And an upcoming Glenview program for Halloween.
Yes.
Morning customs.
Which will be super fun with Laura.
And Victoria.
And Victoria, yes. Thank you for reminding me.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. And, enjoy your day. And Felix, if you want to wrap up with us, we usually stay on the line for a few minutes after everybody signs off just to debrief. Thank you, everyone. I'm so happy that you come and patronize these programs.
And I want to say thank you for this invitation. For me, it was a great, great honor and pleasure to be with the museum. to make a contribution with this little information. I wish that we can have more time, but I think it was excellent, very good, wonderful. Also, at the same time, I have to say, any friends was participating and trying to see this program. Thank you to everybody who was present, and thank you to all of you, Miss Rosalinda, Miss Miss
Cipriano.
Laura, and
All right. Bye, everyone.
bye-bye. Have a great day to everybody. Bye. What's her name?